Welcome to the PDX files. Each week we dive into the weird and the unexplained here in the Pacific Northwest and beyond. My name is Peej.
And I'm Mac.
Mac, what are we talking about tonight?
Well, I think we're going to talk a little bit about an old story in the Portland area, starting back in 1958, a bit of a murder kind of situation, a little disappearance maybe. And we're going to get into this with Jeff Gianola back in '08. But we may have some updates on this, or may just have our own opinions. I think it's a very intriguing story.
Excellent. So, as usual, actually, neither of us have seen this video at all.
It's
So
kind of
this will
quality
be
you've come to expect.
pretty interesting to react to it, and we shall proceed.
Wake up, Portland. It's a wonderful day today.
It was another time, a more innocent place. Portland, Oregon, December 1958.
Dreaming of a white Christmas.
Christmas was in the air with holiday songs on local radio. And inside their Northeast Portland house, the Martin family made plans to collect Christmas boughs and greenery. They got into their 1954 Ford station wagon and left for a Sunday afternoon trip up the gorge. They were never seen or heard from again.
Well, that's a bit ominous.
It took a few days for anyone to realize the Martins had vanished. Ken and Barbara Martin had 3 beautiful daughters, Barbara 14, Virginia 12, and Sue 10. Each Christmas, Ken dressed as Santa to the delight of the neighborhood children. Worried relatives soon alerted authorities and the search began, with posters offering a reward. The Martin story captivated the city. The front pages of the Oregonian and the Oregon Journal were filled with news about the family. What could have happened? Where were they? How was the search going? But as days turned into weeks, there was frustration among searchers, 5 different police agencies, no one really in charge, no coordinated effort, few clues. Christmas and the New Year.
It's really critical.
The Martins were still missing.
This is the 50s, and this kind of thing just really didn't happen.
Dan Portwood is a retired detective who worked for the Dalles Police. The Martin mystery is very personal to Dan. He grew up in Portland and was a schoolmate of Sue Martin's at Rose City Park Elementary.
Sue was in the same grade as I was. Virginia was in the same school and a couple of years older. One weekend, she goes home and never see her again.
50 years after the Martins vanished, my investigation takes me to the Dalles Police Department. The Dalles was one of the agencies involved in the original investigation. 50 years later, they're still on the case.
It's an open case of the disappearance of a family of 5, yes.
Dan Portwood and photojournalist Tom Sr. have come with volumes of notes and information on the case. Much of it never made public. And a lot of the information they have comes from this man, a Multnomah County detective named Walter Graven.
He felt that it was a homicide. He felt that it was solvable. This might be a good place to stop for a moment.
Okay. Since this is still a cold case, I will not reveal some of the information they shared, but what you're about to see and hear is sensitive. It comes from Detective Graven's confidential reports and his personal notebook on the Martin case.
I think it's funny that Jeff Gianola, again, if you live in the area, anything about Portland area, he's been in the Portland media, local media for like 40 years, probably almost. I think it was kind of funny. He was like taking notes for no reason. Like all the notes are already there. He doesn't need to act like he's doing anything important, but it is kind of interesting. The Dalles, back in those days, I don't think other than Google being out in the Dalles now, maybe a couple upgrades, some wineries. I don't think it's really that much different than it was back in those days.
Yeah, I don't think so either. I mean, the Dalles still pretty much has retained its like small town, like totally small town feel, right? And I'm glad that they actually pronounced it. Well, of course, we can't expect anything less from Jeff Gianola, but because we'd had several videos that we'd released before, and the Dalles, the city, the Dalles, was mispronounced. But this obviously was in the late 50s. Definitely a different time. The detective guy kind of reminds me of a character from The Naked Gun. or whatever.
Yeah, a little bit.
So it's
A
kind
little
of
bit, yeah.
interesting that, and I know you were kind of making a little bit of a sound effect there earlier, but so it took 2 days for people to realize it or to understand something was wrong. And that's kind of interesting because isn't that kind of like the current um requirement before somebody can be reported missing is 48 hours?
Yeah, I think there was a show called 48 Hours, if if I'm not
Yeah.
remembering incorrectly, and also a movie. But I mean, it's very much so that you have to, like, strike while the iron's hot, especially back in those days. And what people to remember is that this was a 2008 story, which doesn't seem like so long ago, but I mean, it's 16 years ago, 17 years ago. There's so much more technology that we have now that could probably may have helped solve that case, but not necessarily in the Dalles. It's one of those areas that's kind of stayed kind of locked in time, and certainly in 1958. I mean, you're not going to get any help there from anybody out there because it was just a small, even much more smaller town than it was now. It didn't have any of the kind of tech that we have. So, the fact that it's remained unsolved is not that surprising. If again, if you haven't been out to the area, not that far outside of the Dalles in either direction, there's like nothing. There's- It's like the middle of effing nowhere.
And I don't recall if they mentioned it, but I know that they referred to the gorge as that's the Columbia Gorge.
Yeah, it's not even really in the gorge. I mean, maybe they were taking a drive into the gorge,
Right.
right? Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, who knows?
Okay, and $1,000 reward on the poster there. I was looking at that.
How much is that now? Yeah.
It's worth 16. I'm sorry, it's worth $11,112.85 today.
So about 9 times as much, roughly 9 times as much as it was then. God dang. Wow.
All right.
Yeah, that's really, really interesting.
Here we go.
Once the Martins went missing, Multnomah County Sheriff Detective Walter Graven was on the case. We know the Martins stopped for gas at Cascade Locks. Detectives had found a gas receipt dated December 7th, 1958, mailed back to the Martin home. And a waitress said the Martins had stopped for lunch at a cafe in Hood River. But there was one Martin not missing, 28-year-old Donald. Don was in the Navy and had recently moved to New York. And according to Detective Graven's case file, Donald Martin didn't get along well with his parents. There was something else Graven uncovered. Graven's report states a few years earlier, Don Martin had been fired from his job at Meyer and Frank. When he was caught taking merchandise, the thefts for over $2,000, he admitted to the thefts. Graven now considered Donald Martin a possible suspect in his family's disappearance, but why? More on that in a moment. Meanwhile, with little to go on, other investigators had a new theory about the Martin case. My investigation takes me to Cascade
That's
Locks.
Cascade
We know
Locks.
the Martins stopped for gas here the day they disappeared, but did they vanish here? One theory surrounds the locks themselves and the possibility Ken Martin accidentally drove into the river. As I walk along the locks, it's hard to imagine Ken Martin could accidentally drive into the locks, but this area has changed in 50 years. In 1958, the riverbank went right up to the edge of the locks.
I mean, the riverbank is still right up against the edge of the locks. What he's talking, how can he not have just like little tiny blocks of cement blocking people from driving right out there? How could that stop them? I mean, come on, Jeff.
Well, I don't know maybe he was referring. That wasn't necessarily the spot. I think maybe, right?
Well, it's a bad example if they use that in general, but also, yeah, I mean, it's not that far from the river. The Cascade Locks is like really, really close. It was also kind of interesting was to look at how close the price of gas was to now. It's like almost spot on. It's a little bit less even that, but not a whole lot less.
Well, and then the son stole the equivalent of $22,000 worth of merchandise in today's money. That's a lot of that's a lot of merchandise.
Money. That is a lot of merch. Yeah, but yeah, I don't think it's that shocking to think that he could have driven to the lock. But I think they would have seen some evidence of that. Probably some oil from the gas that was in the car, maybe, or the oil that was in the car that was making it run. I don't know. Again, we're talking about Cascade Locks, which isn't much bigger than it was back in those days. Let's just be honest.
Let's continue.
It had now been 2 months since the Martins vanished, but Detective Graven was about to get his first big clue.
So this person who saw the tracks, did he see tracks literally leading right off the water?
That's what it says in the reports.
That's not Cascade Locks.
Scrapings on a rock right by the water.
We are
That's
standing
much more
on a
by the
rocky
Dalles,
bluff in
yeah.
the Dalles above the Columbia River. In February 1959, 2 months after the Martins vanished, tire tracks leading into the river were found in this exact same spot. And on a rock near the edge of the cliff, paint scrapings matching the Martins' 1954 Ford station wagon. Detective Graven inspected the scene, writing in his report, "There were no return marks to show that this particular vehicle returned and apparently was either pushed or driven off this cliff." Detective Graven was now sure this wasn't an accident.
If it did go off here, I think it reinforces the original theory that the family was killed for some reason and the car pushed off to get rid of the evidence.
But if the Martins were the victims of foul play, who did it and why? Detective Graven was now focusing on 2 ex-cons. The first, a man named Roy Light, was known in the Dalles. He had recently been living near the aluminum plant not far from the cliff where the tire tracks were found. Because this is a cold case, I won't reveal the name of the other ex-con. He may still be alive. According to Detective Graven's report,
Come on, Jeff.
Roy Light and the unnamed ex-con were together the evening the Martins disappeared. They disappeared from the Dalles shortly after this, whereabouts unknown. Remember, on the day the Martins vanished, a waitress said the family stopped to eat at a Hood River cafe. Well, the cafe owner knew Roy Light and the other ex-con. When interviewed by Detective Graven, he stated Roy Light and the unnamed ex-con were at cafe when Martins were there. They left at approximately the same time. And there's more. Around the same time the Martins vanished, the ex-cons had abandoned a stolen 1951 Chevrolet near Cascade Locks. A stolen gun was later found not far from the car.
Then it was completely coated with the dried blood from whatever they had clubbed. They had clubbed something to death, apparently.
This is the gun.
Something.
In 1986, photojournalist Tom Sr. interviewed Bonnie Cox. Her husband is the person who found the gun in some bushes near Cascade Locks, and it was obvious it had been used for something sinister.
But covered with the dried blood, all up and down the barrel. It was dried. And after they decided that it hadn't been, it had been used to kill something.
The gun was turned over to the Hood River Sheriff, but never processed as evidence. The gun was later returned to the man who found it, who repaired the damage to the weapon. The ex-cons were never questioned. And then something unexpected. The serial number on the stolen gun was traced to Myron Frank. It was among the sporting good items Don Martin was accused of stealing. It seemed like a strange coincidence.
The gun seems to be at the
murder
center
for hire.
of it. It sort of ties all these other little events together.
As far as the possibility of it being a homicide, there are just so many coincidences that point
I would agree.
that way.
Foul play. Detective Graven had already come to that conclusion, but his personal notebook reflects frustration. He wrote in his notebook, "Even though I can get no cooperation from anyone, there is no murder that cannot be solved."
Was he
Meanwhile,
texting back in those
Don
days to
Martin
somebody?
didn't come back to Oregon until March 1959, 3 months after his family went missing. He came to settle the family estate. That spring, the search for the Martins took another unexpected twist. On May 1st, 1959, almost 5 months after the Martins vanished, a barge was dropping anchor in the Columbia River below the area where the tire tracks were found.
The anchor fell on something very heavy, and when they pulled the anchor, one of the deckhands had reached down with a pole and struck what he said was definitely metal. At about that time, whatever it was cleared the anchor, and they never actually saw it.
They didn't see it, but crew members reported they hooked something the size of a car.
I don't see how the police couldn't have gotten access to that area and put a couple divers down there when they found that. I mean, it's not like it's in the middle of the ocean.
Right.
And it certainly is possible. I mean, and again, as he said, there are a lot of coincidences, a lot of connections, a lot of dots being connected that it does lead to some sort of pattern with this. As if the kid decided he wanted to put his family to rest so he could take over the family business,
Right.
or something along those lines. Does seem to be, and he hired these two losers to go out and try to do it. And maybe they did do it, but they obviously made a lot of mistakes. I guess you're getting what you paid for if you're working in the Dalles and trying to get people to do that kind of stuff. But it's very compelling, the evidence so far, to sort of suggest that maybe the son is a little bit
And
has
why did
something
it
to do
take
with
him exactly? Why did it take him so long to come back out to Oregon? I mean, I think they did. Did they say he moved to? Why am I forgetting this now? He moved to New York or something like that.
Yeah, it was somewhere on the East Coast, but I mean, it didn't get along with him, so I can kind of understand that if they were estranged, why he wouldn't come back right away to come, except for the fact that there was obviously some money to be taken care of. So was that a bit of a show, to sort of separate yourself from that? Yeah,
Oh,
I mean, yeah.
yeah. I mean, like that was the impetus for him to come back to settle the estate. But I figure, oh, I don't know, my entire family just disappeared. I mean, I feel like I need to be concerned here. I don't know. I mean, it's just really interesting.
Agreed.
Okay, we'll continue here.
Just 2 days after the barge took the metal object, Portland residents woke to blaring headlines in the paper. The body of Sue Martin had been found in the Camas Slough, identified by her dentist through
Boo
dental
boy.
records. Then the next day, workers at Bonneville Dam discovered the body of Virginia Martin. Had the barge anchor hooked the Martin car, causing the bodies to surface? We examined the
Makes
autopsy
sense.
report on Virginia Martin. It states she died of probable drowning, no evidence of foul play. But we also found a report by a Multnomah County identity technician. Russell Bissett took fingerprints and photographed the body. His report on photograph 6 clearly states showing head with hole in head. Other than one poor photocopy, we were unable to find the
Jesus.
original autopsy photographs. On May 23, 1959, there was a funeral service for Sue and Virginia Martin. Brother Don missed the memorial, claiming in a newspaper article there was a mix-up on the funeral date. But when he did arrive back to Portland, Don Martin sat down face-to-face with Detective Graven. He told him he suspected foul play. I know of no one who would murder my folks or no reason for it, but I don't see how it could have been an accident. We couldn't find any burial records for Sue or Virginia Martin. We did discover their bodies were cremated at Portland's Riverview Abbey. But their remains went unclaimed for 10 years, sitting on a shelf.
What?
We were unable to find out any other information. We do know there was a cloud of suspicion that followed Don Martin the rest of his life. According to his children, he told them very little about what happened, gave no details about their grandparents and aunts who went missing that December day 50 years ago. The island of Oahu, Hawaii is 2,500 miles from Portland. This was Don Martin's home until a few years ago when he died. Don raised 4 children. One son who lives here wanted to talk to us and learn more about the disappearance of his grandparents and aunts 50 years ago, something his father didn't share with him. But after agreeing to meet me, he changed his mind.
Come on, Jeff. Come on now. Really?
Yeah. So
So you arrange this little photo op for yourself? Come on. But anyway,
what are you talking about?
Jeff Gianola, he's like showing up at the place that the guy says no, he doesn't want to meet with him. I
No.
wonder if he.
Did you not hear it? The guy wants to meet with him.
Yes, but then he changed his mind at the last minute. Did you not hear that part of it?
So let's see what happens here.
I mean, it is interesting though. The thing that just briefly on that, it's kind of disturbing that he didn't care anything for his siblings and just left the ashes in the place for 10
Unclaimed.
years. That
Unclaimed.
is pretty messed up.
I mean, it comes back to talk to the detective. Good on him for that, and like
Yeah.
saying, suspecting that it was foul play. Well, I don't know. I mean, that's
There's
just
a lot of circumstantial evidence. Let's
that's
just say
definitely
that.
that's definitely a weird level of estrangement there. I mean, plus he's like I don't know. Does he seem like he's at least 10 or 12 years older than
Oh yeah.
than the next kid?
Yeah, he was the oldest, and then all of a sudden they had a few extras, and then he was no longer the the golden boy, and maybe he should never have been. Obviously, and
Or was
even if he didn't kill them, that's just weird.
this from a second marriage? Maybe, I don't know. We probably need to do it.
Yeah, Jeff didn't get into that for us.
All right. Well, we'll see what happens here with Jeff.
All right. Hope he gets punched.
John Martin's daughter later told us, "It's a chapter in our lives better left closed."
This is a little notebook.
Gloria Graven goes through an old suitcase filled with her father's obsessions. The detective kept his notes, pictures, and files on the Martin case, hoping for that one clue to unlock the mystery. As a little girl, Gloria remembers her father talking about the case.
Dad assumed that probably Kenneth Martin was shot in the head, and the girls and the mom then probably knocked out, and the car shoved over into the river. It's really deep where this particular spot is.
Time ran out for Walter Graven. He retired his badge in 1966 without solving the Martin case, a mystery that haunted him. In his notebook, he wrote, "Will be solved if I live long enough for the car and bodies to be found." He didn't. Walter Graven died in 1988.
I don't understand.
Walter Graven wasn't the only detective who worked the Martin case. I arrive at the Multnomah County Sheriff's Office to review their cold case files on the Martins.
It's an FBI report, it looks like. It's from the Federal Bureau of Investigation, D.C.
Based on our story and renewed interest, Multnomah County detectives are now taking another look at this cold case and a new attempt possibly to find the Martins' car.
We're currently considering completing a dive mission to take a look at.
I was just going to say, why did they do this like 50 years ago?
In the Columbia River. We have some more advanced technology where we can scan the area subsurface without putting divers in the water.
And the fact is, this case really can't be solved unless the car and the bodies are found. Dan Portwood, Tom Sr., and Police Chief Jay Waterbury are not giving up.
And I'm sure the original detective, Detective Graven, we know he wanted to finish it, but it was way beyond his time, and I'm sure he went to his grave with things that we would like to know, but we never will.
But did Walter Graven know something? Something he kept to himself. On the last pages of his personal notebook, I found this entry. Had to be planned by, the name is X'd out. No one else with motive. Detective Graven had scribbled over the name of his suspect. Why? Only he knows. It's all part of the strange coincidences and connections in this mystery. The family that went for a Sunday drive 50 years ago and never came back.
Why didn't they do the dive like back in those days? They still had the technology to be able to do it. It didn't make any sense to me, the fact that they didn't do it.
Yeah, that's a mystery as well. Unless,
I mean, I know the Columbia River is like a serious river. It's like not to be messed with, but I mean, they have divers. They had divers.
Yeah, it's not a placid river. I mean, it's definitely you know very fast moving waters. So two things. One, was it not important enough? I mean, it doesn't seem like it's not important enough because it made the papers. Two,
yeah, but the resources.
Okay, yeah. So resources, and then three would be, I'm concerned that when the anchor was dropped from the barge,
it destroyed all the evidence.
Dislodged. Well, it seemed to have dislodged a couple of bodies. What if the other three bodies also got dislodged and then floated away?
Yeah, because even if it didn't end up where they wanted, yeah.
You know what I mean? So even if they recover the car, chances of the three other bodies being there is kind of 50-50 at this point, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I mean, and certainly there are fish on the bottom of the Columbia River who can eat some of that stuff, and finding bones in an area like that, and they're probably spread out all over the place. The biggest thing that they could probably find is the car. That probably wouldn't have gone that far, I don't think. But the fact that they matched the paint, they shot that tire tracks went off in a certain area. Why they didn't get divers on that shit right away, says to me that in those days, like as you said, like nobody cared. Even though the papers did, the papers aren't the ones paying the bills for the
Yep.
people who can go do that stuff, right? So the
Dives,
state
yeah.
was kind of like, well, you know, they're probably dead. There's not much we can do. We're not going to send divers
Well,
out
they're
there.
probably
Like,
dead
say,
by
"Oh,
now.
gee."
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, shame, yeah.
Transatlantic. No, wait, that's too. But
There's some more Chicago gangster kind of talk, but yeah, I mean, it is interesting that it does seem a lot of the evidence points towards, but on a very circumstantial level, like it could be anybody, but certainly the son. And it does appear to me, just from this video, even though Jeff Gianola was trying to act like some big sort of detective, this getting all these new clues, that it was probably those two guys that were probably paid in some way or promised payment, maybe, to do the crime. This is what it looks like to me.
yeah, and I wonder if that final entry of the detective Graven or Craven or something,
Graven, yeah.
Where
It isn't a
he-
Wes Craven, no.
where he
Yeah.
xed out the name. I would bet $1,958 that it said Donald, that it would have said the son did it. So
Yeah, I think so too. It looked like about the right size compared to his handwriting, if we were going
Yeah.
to look at it.
yeah,
Yeah. So I think there's a follow up to this, though, isn't there?
I think so, and we may have to definitely dive into that in the next episode, or the next sorry, in the future episode, I should say.
I'm looking forward to that because I think we have our own preconceived notions about this case. And there does seem to be, again, a lot of good evidence. Again, 1958 style kind of detective work. And they didn't have DNA, like they could have used DNA on that gun, right?
Right.
If it actually had blood on that, they didn't have the ability to do that back in those days. There's certain crimes you can't get away with anymore. This would probably be one of those. But because they don't have that evidence available, it still kind of maintains its air of mystery.
Well, I'm glad we took it back to the Pacific Northwest for this episode, and
It's a good one.
yeah, and
It's
if you
it
enjoyed
was a
this
good find.
content, yeah. So, folks, if you enjoyed this content, please give it a like and share it across your socials to help get the word out about our show. If you hadn't already done so, please subscribe, and on YouTube, please hit that notification bell to make sure you don't miss out on future episodes. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time.